Welcome to the Longest Turn Board Gaming Podcast. This is episode 8, Top 5 6-Player Games. My name is Tyler.
Hello, this is Kevin.
This is Tyson.
So like I said, this is episode 8. In this episode, we are going to discuss some of the games that we've been playing lately. And then we're going to go to a top 5 list, our top 5 6-player board games. That's where we're at. Tyson, what have you been playing lately?
So recently, Blood Rage got added to Board Game Arena.
Booyah.
In beta.
It's in beta.
Is it still in beta?
It's still in beta, I believe. At least as of the recording of this podcast.
Seems pretty polished, though, at this point. I'm happy with it.
Yeah, no, exactly. And Blood Rage has always been one of my favorite games. I'd say it's always been a top 5. So we've talked about Ankh and compared it to Blood Rage a little bit in the past. And I think originally when we talked about that, I had said that I think I like Blood Rage better. Well, now that Blood Rage is on BGA, I've been able to play it a lot. And I still really like this game. So the theme behind Blood Rage is that you are a Viking clan during Ragnarok, and you're trying to battle for glory and have a glorious death potentially and all these things. So there's a bunch of different mechanics in the game. Area control, there's card drafting, there's scaling along tracks to increase points and scores, and there's obviously combat. It's a card-driven combat system similar to some of the other games designed by Eric Lang of this type. And like I said, originally, I had said that I thought I liked Blood Rage better. Having played this more and more on BGA, I don't know that holds true. I still really like Blood Rage, and I think it's a fantastic game, and it's really fun. But I think that of the two, I'd probably be saying I like Ankh better, but I need to play them both on the table in close proximity to each other to really know that. You guys have both played on BGA Blood Rage now, and I know Tyler this is his first experience on or off the table playing it.
Yeah, and I've got a few plays under my belt now.
So what are some of your guys' thoughts?
I think the game is better in person. I think it loses a little bit on BGA. I'm glad it's there because I do enjoy the game. I love the drafting, and I love kind of formulating your strategy and trying to pull off that strategy. I love how you can make up ground in the game. So even if you're behind going into the third age or whatever it's called, you can make up a lot of ground in that third age. We played a game recently, and I was way behind going into that last round. I made up a whole lot of ground and got within, I think, 6 points of you.
You were,
right at the end, right? And I was way behind before.
You came out of nowhere, and I was like, oh, that was a lot closer than I had expected.
Yeah, and that was exciting because I maxed out every single one of my tracks. I drafted 2 cards that were the quest cards, and then I had an upgrade that says I get double points for each quest I complete.
Odin's Throne.
Yeah, the Odin's Throne or whatever.
Card,
and I'm like, oh, that was so cool. That was so exciting because I saw that as I was drafting the cards. And I'm like, okay, I think I can make a lot of points doing this. And I was able to pull it off. And even though I lost, I made up a lot of ground, and I was only back by 6. So that whole card drafting thing was exciting. I think the battle mechanic is fun where there's just all kinds of different cards in there that can nullify the text on other people's cards, or you can play a card after everybody else plays the cards that completely, that adds to your points. And it's just cool. Unexpected things that happen in the game are fun, and the battle mechanic is fun. Comparing it to Ankh, I think Ankh's a better game, but I really enjoy Blood Rage as well. So I think, both games deserve a spot on my shelf.
Yeah, no, I agree. And going back to the card drafting, though, I think that is really where this game shines, because it can formulate all your strategies, and everything is kind of based around that in a very exciting way. And I think it loses something on BGA, the card drafting specifically, because it's harder, especially if you're playing it asynchronously. It's harder to remember what cards have been passed on.
I'm glad this is on BGA. I got a dozen or so games of Ankh in before I played Blood Rage. I'm glad it's on BGA that I could try it out. I wrote about this on our blog a little bit. To me, I'm sure I'll enjoy it more playing it on the table, and being able to play it on the BGA will make that a lot easier when I actually get it to the table. I think that'll make that experience more enjoyable. When comparing it to Ankh, for me, Ankh is a vastly superior game. And if I ever had the choice of playing Blood Rage or Ankh, I would choose Ankh. So that's where I'm at. I often have opposing views, more varying views than you guys do on specific games. And I think this is one of those cases where
I still think you need to play it on the table.
Yeah.
But I also think that's going to,
think
no
that-
matter what, your opinion is going to be.
I don't think it'll ever
Yes,
compare to
right.
Ankh for me. I think my opinion will definitely improve on the game once I play it on the table.
Well, I think that's the opinion we all have, though. It's even you mentioned that, Tyson. I think Ankh is a better game.
I do too. I didn't think that initially because I had such nostalgic and fantastic viewpoints of this, because it was one of the early games of this ilk that I had played, and I've had this game on my shelf for a pretty long time now. And so like it does things that Ankh also does. It evokes similar feelings that Ankh does, and like those exciting pivotal moments of seeing how like the cards will unfold. Like when you're playing the battle mechanics and you play a card and it was the right card to play at the right time. Like Kevin did it in one match where he built up this battle, got us all in, and then he played the card that says everybody essentially discards their cards that they played, and the total value of strength on those cards count as the glory, aka victory points that you gain. Yeah. And so he wiped out all our good cards, gets points for it. Then he plays another card right after it to be able to win the battle, and then gets the points out of the battle as well. Like that type of a moment is just awesome, I think.
I agree. And I kind of feel bad that you didn't play it on the table first,
I do.
Tyler, because
that would have been awesome.
Because like we played it at your house. It's been a long time, but
it's been a couple of years.
It's been a couple of years, but it's the type of game where you just get excited. It's like stand-up moments around the table. It's like you play cards and you lose that on BGA.
Well, and you got to keep that poker face too, because you're like, I don't want to reveal what my card is.
Exactly, because you play a card and then you play a card and then you come back 2 hours later and you look to see what happened.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
It's like, oh, cool, I won. But it wasn't that like moment where you're playing it actually on the table. So I think
I can totally see that, and maybe that's why it's felt like a little bit of a letdown.
And Ankh, I think, would be the same type of experience if it were on BGA.
If Ankh were on BGA, I think it would be
like you would lose those moments.
Yeah, exactly.
And I can see how some of the cards can create some really exciting moments and experiences within the game.
Or like you take the Loki strategy, right? Where you're intentionally building up a battle and putting tons of guys in there, but then you throw the battle. Yeah, exactly.
It's like the guy's like, yeah, I killed you. You did.
And that's what I wanted.
That's what I wanted, right? I mean, that's cool. And I love the different monster powers too. The guy that goes in and just destroys all the warriors.
The troll,
the troll. it's like that's just fun to play, you know. And the minis are awesome. The production is fantastic in that game. That was I've had it for a while, and I remember opening it and looking at the troll and looking at the dude that's carrying the rock. I don't know who he is.
Yeah, fire giant.
Yeah, fire giant, or the sea serpent. I'm like, whoa. These sculpts are amazing.
And if you've seen any of them painted, it's
on Board Game. Yeah, you pull it up on Board Game Geek and you look at all the painted minis. It's like there's some talented people out there.
Definitely way better on the table than it is on BGA, but I'm glad it's on BGA.
Yeah,
agreed.
And I'm glad I've been able to try it out, and I look forward to whenever we finally get it to the table again.
Whenever that is. Yeah. We got a lot of games to play, so
it's a terrible problem to have.
Yeah, right.
There are worse problems, but
sure.
For sure. A game that I've been playing is by one of our well, I think it's one of our favorite designers, right? At least it's a designer that we play a lot of his games, and it's Tom Lehman. He designed one of our favorites, Res Arcana. He does all of the games in the Race for the Galaxy series. I've talked about Roll for the Galaxy in a previous podcast. The one I'm going to talk about today is one called Jump Drive. This is by far the shortest game in that Race for the Galaxy series. It plays in, depending on how many players, but it could play in as quick as 10 minutes. It's that quick. The way it plays is you get a number of cards as your starting cards. The iconography on the cards is similar to the other games in the series. So there's developments, that's a triangle. There's worlds, that's going to be a circle. Depending on the type of world, it could be a military world and be red. Normal world will just be, just a black circle with a different color on it. It's a little bit more simplistic. There's not as much iconography as in some of the other games in the series, which for a lot of people can be a good thing because that's one of the complaints about Race for the Galaxy is the iconography can be a little heavy and a little hard to understand at first. This is definitely a more simplified version. So the way the game plays is you get a number of cards to start off. You have a few choices. You can play a development, you can play a world, or you can play both of those. If you play a development, you get a little bit of a discount, one cost discount. So if it's 4 cost, you only pay 3. You pay your currency in the game is the cards that you have in your hand. Or you can play a world. If you play a world, then you get to draw a card from the top of the deck. If you play both of those things at the same time, you don't get any bonus at all. Everybody plays, you reveal the cards, you pay for the cards, and then it goes to the income phase. Income means you get cards. You get to draw cards from the top of the deck based on what you have in front of you. So there'll be a little icon on the card that says you get to draw a card. After that, you get victory points. And you just go along your cards and you count up how many victory points you get, and you take that from the victory point pile. Rinse and repeat. You do that for probably 5 or 6 rounds. Whoever gets to, I believe, 50 first is the winner. What I like about this game is it's quick. Like I said, it can be like 10 minutes long, but it offers so many decisions. It's, am I going to keep this card or am I going to use it to pay for this card? You're building an engine, and the escalation of the engine is super interesting. So you're only getting a few victory points to start off the game, right? But by the 5th or 6th round, you are just raking in the victory points if you can get your engine going.
That sounds like Tom Lehman through and through.
That's exactly right. So he's got this whole engine building concept down, right? And this is a really streamlined version of it. But like I said, it offers a lot of fun decisions, and it's in a small package, and it's in a quick play time, which, if you want that fix of an engine builder, then it's a good one to go to. So
and you got those cool fancy bits for it too.
Yeah, so I got the Geek Up bit set from Board Game Geek, just the victory point counters. And the reason why I got those, because they're not necessarily cheap, but I can use them for New Frontiers, for Jump Drive, for Roll for the Galaxy, for Race for the Galaxy, and it's just awesome.
I think that is cool, I almost wish more games would do that type of a thing where you can have like a specialty component that can be used across the board. I mean, that's essentially what the Roxley poker chips are, right? Like I use them in so many different games.
Yeah. The Iron Clays, those are fantastic, especially for train games. Right?
I think it benefits any publisher to share icons across some of their other games. It benefits them to have players that are already familiar with those icons.
Yeah, I mean, you see that in the Czech Games Edition games, right? So Underwater Cities and Pulsar 2849, for example.
Or Adrenaline also has some of the same components.
Wait a minute, I've never heard of that one. What is that?
It's a great game that you guys should really try.
It's a first-person shooter.
It's a Euro game form? It's a Euro game.
Hey, maybe
through and through.
Since we've been playing so much Halo lately, we should play that in the next couple of weeks.
Oh, let's totally do that.
Yeah.
Oh, wait,
you want to play Tyson in the next couple of weeks?
Yeah, I want to play in the next
That was a death stare.
For those of you who are listening, there was a death glare that I just got because Tyson's going to be out of town for a little bit. And he's been trying to get us to play this first-person shooter
This wonderfully
Damn.
thematic
for what,
and
a year?
Right. Well, and
More than a
it's
year.
probably a really fun game, but at this point, it's kind of a thing
almost-
that we just aren't going to play it.
Yeah. We
out
gotta-
of principle,
yeah, right?
Yeah.
which is a terrible. Who chooses that hill to die on?
I don't
I don't know, but it's fun.
We're having a good time right now.
We got to be nice, though. He's going away from
I know. We are going to miss you, Tyson.
I
so.
really want somebody out there, the one or two people who listen to
Who've
us,
played
who've played
Adrenaline.
Adrenaline, to say, to tell both Tyler and Kevin what they're missing out. Because
Like I said, it's probably a really fun game, and I'm sure we'd enjoy it. But out of principle, we probably won't play it now.
but yeah, it shares
I don't understand
components
how you go
as
from
well.
first-person shooter to a tabletop.
You know how you
game?
figure out how it works is you play it.
You actually play the game.
Does it
I
have?
wonder how this game works. Well, there's rules you can read and actually play it.
Yeah, but that's. I mean,
I don't know. Well,
we'll play it.
we'll let you know how it is in a few weeks.
Thanks,
Tyson.
I appreciate it.
All right, so one of the games that I've been playing lately, both with you guys and with family, is another love letter game. This one's Star Wars Jabba's Palace. And there are some things that I just love about this game. If you're not familiar with love letter, the basic concept is you start out with a single card in your hand, and when it's your turn, you draw a card, and then you play one of your two cards, and each card has its own special ability and has a different result based on which card you play. And you're trying to either one, outlast everybody else, eliminate them. I mean, generally for love letter games, you're either trying to eliminate them or by the end of the round, have the highest card still in your hand when everybody reveals their cards, who is left. So if you do that, if you eliminate everybody else in a round or you have the highest card at the end of the round, you score a victory point. When you get to a certain amount of victory points, you win the game. So it's a really simple game. I love Jabba's Palace. One, I love Star Wars. I'm a Star Wars nerd since my childhood, despite what happened with
I totally knew you were going to bring that up. You cannot talk about Star Wars and not bring up the new movies.
Despite what happened with episode 8 and episode 9 and now Book of Boba Fett. I love Star Wars. It's been a part of my life as far as, pop culture and nerddom forever. So one of the first movies I remember watching was the Care Bears versus the Imperials in Return of the Jedi, which was awesome as a kid. But then as you grow up and become an adult, it's like, wow, that was kind of terrible. So maybe it's not just episodes 7 through 9. Anyway,
For someone who loves Star Wars, you're pretty critical of it.
I'm critical of all things on the big screen. Back to Jabba's Palace, a love letter game. I really like this. It probably is shot to the top of my favorite implementations of love letter. Number one, it has 6 players max that you can play, which can be a lot of fun. Number 2, there are 2 basically factions of cards. You have the Rebel Alliance, and then you have Jabba's crew, or the Palace crew, whatever they're called. And there are varying numbers in both of those factions, and they have different abilities. Whereas every other love letter game I've played, for the most part, I think, if it's a 5, all the 5s do the same thing. And in this game, some of those powers are different depending on which faction they're in. That's really cool. There are also 4 different agenda cards which determine who gets the victory points at the end of the round. It's not just the highest card. It might be the highest rebel card in your tableau or in the cards that you've played. There's one that awards a victory point to both the player with the highest rebel card and the highest Jabba's crew card. Another thing that I really like about this implementation of love letter, Han Solo, as we know in Jabba's Palace, is frozen in carbonite. And that's how he is in this game. Han Solo is a 0, right? He has no value. He has no potential to beat other cards when you have to do a comparison.
Decoration on the wall.
He's a decoration on the wall. However, if you finish the round with Han Solo in your hand, you get a victory point. And you could potentially score for the agenda card as well and get 2 victory points, which is awesome. And that comes up a little bit in the Batman love letter as well. I mean, you can guess with a Batman and get a victory point for guessing correctly and the round with that guess and get an extra victory point. However, I think it's so much more impressive and cool to do it with Han Solo in your hand as a 0, because that is so much harder to do. I really like the varying powers in this love letter game. You know, I really enjoy the Hobbit. I really enjoy the Batman. I didn't love the Infinity Gauntlet one. That wasn't my favorite, but I love Jabba's Palace. I have one small critique is, please, I know this is a love letter thing, but stop putting the game in a bag. Like, I don't want my cards held in a bag. I want them in a box.
How do you store that?
Yeah.
I mean, you're just going to chuck it in something, right?
Right. And I sleeve my cards. They barely fit into the opening of the bag. So I have, some photo boxes now that I keep all of my, or photo cases that I keep all of my love letter games in, and some other card games that I've sleeved that don't fit in their box. So that's a small critique. And it's such a cheap game. Fine. Like $13, I can't really complain about that too much, but it just, I'm not sure what the reasoning was behind going down that path, however many love letters ago. So
I think that this love letter, like you said, it's up there as one of the best love letters. I think it does a good job at taking some of the best parts of other love letters and kind of compiling them. You already mentioned how like Han Solo versus the Batman one and how it takes that stuff. But I also think that it does a good job. You said the dual factions of the Palace versus the Rebel Alliance cards. It reminds me a lot of the Lovecraft letter version of that, which does the same thing, that has 2 different factions that have 2 different powers for the number. And I really like that one. That one may be my favorite. I
haven't played.
And it may be my favorite, but I need to play that one again. I haven't played it in a long time. But it has that mechanic, which I really liked. I think that if I played both back to back, it might be that the Star Wars one ends up taking my favorite place in the end, because one, thematically I like it better, and then 2, it's just like I think it does things a lot more smoothly.
Yeah, I picked up this one, so I have it. Played it with my family, and it went over really well.
Good.
With my family.
Awesome.
They just loved it. So we've been huge fans of the Batman love letter for a long time, and we've played that one to death, and I still love that one. I think it's just a blast to play. But I agree with you, Tyler. This one adds some different things that I think makes it a little bit more interesting.
Yeah.
And I like how you said they're the agenda cards.
Yep.
That change the kind of the victory conditions of the round, which is just awesome. It just changes how you play and how you think about it, which I think is just a really good addition. I like that. I like that a lot. So I think it's great. I love most of the love letter games I've played. We've played the Hobbit one. We have that one. We have the Thanos. I don't know what it's called.
I think it's an Infinity Gauntlet.
Infinity Gauntlet, whatever that one is. Haven't played it yet, but it's sitting in its bag on my shelf.
Yeah, it's sitting in its bag. I didn't love it. It wasn't my favorite, but this one I do love. I haven't played
Lovecraft
the
letter.
Lovecraft letter. I have played Loot Letter, which is the Munchkin one.
It's funny. I have never played the original.
I haven't either.
I have
You haven't?
I think it's on BGA too.
Is it?
I think so.
I can't imagine that
wouldn't be
one
very
is
fun.
fun.
No, unless
like
you'd have to play.
It's like playing Llama on BGA. It's like,
Yeah.
I mean, I don't get me wrong. I like Llama, but on BGA, not good.
So, I mean, Love Letter in general, I think we all enjoy playing. It's a good filler game. It's a good gateway game to put in front of people, especially someone who's gung-ho about Star Wars. Yeah, that's Star Wars Jabba's Palace, a love letter game.
So if we had been talking about The Hobbit, love letter, my transition would have been about dwarves, because the next game I'm talking about is all about dwarves, and it is Nidavellir.
Daggathair, what?
Yeah, something like that. Nidavellir. I don't know how to pronounce this one, but I do know how to play this game, and I'm enjoying it a lot lately. It is a 2 to 5 player game designed by Sergei Leggett, and the publisher is, I'm going to screw this up, it's Grrr Games, GRR.
I'm sorry, what was that?
What? One more time.
Did you just burp? Like, what happened?
I didn't name the company, but that's how it looks like it's pronounced.
I gotta look this up now.
GRRRE.
If I knew how to spell the game, I would be able to look it up.
GRRE?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think you got it right.
Yeah, thank you.
How do you even spell the base game? I mean, the game. Nidavellir?
Nidavellir. Nidavellir.
Nidavellir.
So Nidavellir is a game that is a card drafting, set collection, bidding game. In it, what you're trying to do is collect sets of dwarves by drafting them through a bidding mechanic. This bidding mechanic, I think, is really cool, because essentially what it is every player gets 5 tokens at the start of the game, a 0 to 5 or 0 to 4, something like that. And each coin has a value, 0 through 4. And you get to bid on rows of dwarves that are at taverns or inns. Depending on how many players you're playing with, there's a set number of dwarves in each tavern. And what you're doing is, at the start of the round, you're going to take one of your coins and place it face down next to the tavern, the first tavern, second, and third tavern. And by doing so, you're placing a value that you're going to bid for this. Now, you can get coins that value up to, I believe, 25. So at the start of the game, your value is really low, but then it gets really high. And in fact, you may even start with a 10 coin. I can't remember the values off the top of my head. But you are trying to increase your coin value by placing the 0 coin. Because when you place a 0 coin, what it does is it takes the 2 coins that you didn't play that are in your hand and takes their sum total, and you get to switch the highest value. So if I have a 2 and a 3 in my hand, they equal 5, and I replace my 3 coin with a 5 coin. So you're going through and trying to increase the amount that you can bid on things while trying to get these dwarves. And each dwarf has a scoring rule. So, for example, if you get the purple dwarves, they are increasing in value by like a set number of points each time. So the first purple dwarf you get is worth 1 point, but by the end, if you get so many dwarves, you can get up to like 100 something points for all of the purple dwarves you have. So each of them have a scoring rule like that is just unique. And so you're trying to set, collect, and get the most points at the end. Now, the theme is really superfluous in this game. It doesn't matter at all. It could be anything. But I do have one gripe about it, and that's in the rule book. Like, if you read this rule book, it's trying to be very thematic and like giving names and descriptions on every little thing that, as I'm reading through that rule book, it's kind of distracting me from what the actual play is. So I ended up having to watch a video to really figure out what was going on, because that rule book was hard for me, particularly when trying to understand specific dwarf hero cards. And dwarf heroes are just extra special scoring things that you can get. So the game, I think, is a lot of fun. Now, Kevin, I think you've played this game. What has been your experience on this one?
Yeah, so I've played it. We're currently in a game now. And so it's been a little bit of time since I played it before. But what I do remember really liking about the game is what you said, leveling up your money, right? And that decision of, do I hold back the higher numbers instead of bidding them for this round, put out my 0 so I can get higher numbers for future rounds, or do I try and get those rows now and start building up those dwarf cards that I think I can win a bid on? I remember that was a fun aspect of the game. And then, formulating a strategy and trying to get all the cards that meet your strategy was a lot of fun. I remember really liking it, and I need to dig into it more and play more, but I remember really liking the plays I had of it.
So when you say we're currently playing it, I think we're in round 0 because I haven't taken my turn yet. But
yeah, right. Well, technically, we're currently playing it. Yes. Yeah. Well, 2 of us are. You haven't started yet.
Yeah. So I played this with you a couple months ago, and I think with Mark. And I glanced at the rules. I thought I'd figure it out as I went along. It piqued my interest that I want to actually know the rules before I play it again, and that's why I haven't taken my turn. I was excited about it. I think it's going to be fun. It seems like a cool game. I was punching buttons the last time that we played it, and I think you destroyed both Mark and I.
Yeah, because I think I'm the only one that know how to play. So it benefits
knowing how to play
for sure.
Is
sure.
I think that's a blanket
strategy.
It's a blanket statement for all games.
And Tyson's speaking from experience because he's played 15 games of Clans and 20 games of Teo and all on BGA without
winning a single game
or knowing the rules or
just pushing buttons.
Yes. Yeah. You've made it through that many games pushing buttons. That's
No, I've read the rules on both of those multiple times.
Well, like we've talked about before, it is difficult to
get into
a meatier game just on BGA. For
right. Sure. But no, this is a Nidavellir. I like this game. I think it's simple. It's fun. It can be played relatively quickly, and it's a good time.
And it's fun to say.
It is fun to say.
And there's an expansion.
Thingavellir,
which I thought that was like...
I had no idea about this one.
Saying Thingavellir, but I think it's an actual location in Iceland, potentially.
Oh. See, I thought
maybe
the same thing.
other places in Scandinavia. But
very cool. Yeah, I'm definitely interested in checking that one out. All right, the next game I want to talk about is a game that's been out for a little bit of time now. It is Century Spice Road. This one was designed by Emerson Matsuuchi and published by Plan B Games. So apparently I'm going to talk about a lot of engine builders in this episode because that's exactly what this game is. It's a very, very simplistic engine builder. I think the rules are just the front and back of one page. Not a lot of rules to get into it. But that doesn't detract from, I think, how good the game is. It's very stripped down, but I think it's very fun. So to play the game, you start off with two starter cards. There are a row of cards in front of you. There are various resources. If you play the original Century Spice Road, you've got 4 different spices. If you play the Golem edition, I think they're just 4 different gems or ruby. I don't know what thematically they represent, right? And it doesn't really matter what they represent. If you're playing the Century Spice Road version, we just basically call the spices whatever the color is, right?
So if you're colorblind, you're in trouble with this one.
Yeah, right. So you start with these starter cards, and then you can select cards from this row. If you select the first card, it's free. If you select cards that are further down the row, you have to pay a cost in spice to get those cards. Now, these cards will do various things. They'll either give you additional spices, or they will convert spices that you have to other spices. So what you're trying to do is you're trying to build an engine where you get spices, you convert them to other spices to get the right combination for cards that you can purchase that are scoring cards. There's a row of, I believe, 5 scoring cards. If you get a card in one of the first 2 spots, you could potentially get an additional bonus coin that's worth, I believe, 3 for the one furthest to the left, depending on how you're looking at it, or 2 for the one or 1 for the one that's next to that. So you're trying to get spices to get these cards. The cards have a number value. whoever gets to 5 cards that they have purchased first, and this is in a 4-player game. I think that changes for the player count. Whoever gets to 5 first, that signals the end of the game. You finish out that round, and then you count up scores. So you have the scoring cards. You count up the number value on the scoring cards, plus any additional points you got for those scoring cards, and whoever has the most points wins. Like I said, it's a very simplistic engine builder, but it's very satisfying, at least for me, to get that engine going and, get it so where you can get the spices you need in order to buy those cards. So that's Century Spice Road. What do you guys think?
I have owned this game for a while. It sat on my shelf of shame, and I got it off towards the end of last year for the first time. And like you said, that the fact that it's like one sheet of paper of rules, it's so easy to get into, and it's simple to teach to anybody. This game has a lot of, I like it a lot. It's interesting because it's often compared to Splendor.
I was going to say that, yeah.
And Splendor was actually one of the first games I ever remember. Like, my parents bought Splendor on a whim, and I remember like in college going home and seeing this copy of Splendor and looking at the rules and thinking, man, that's complex. Like, it was one of the first experiences I had with a board game rule book, and I was like, I don't want to really deal with that. But it's the same type of a feel of a game, Splendor is, as Century Spice Road, but it's so much more approachable, I think. Like, just easy to get into, easy to play, and it is a lot of fun. I'm not very good at it, but it's a lot of fun.
I enjoy it. I think I like it more than Splendor if we're comparing those two. I don't think I play optimally. I mean, Kevin's engine was on fire in this last game. I think it's really fun when you're in the position and you have an awesome engine going, and you get to the point where you need to purchase 2 victory point cards to end the game, and you build up. You can hold up to 10 resources on your caravan or whatever. You can do it in a way that you buy 2 cards in one turn after the other and end the game, and other people might still only have 3 or 4, or 2 less than what the max is. And that's a fun experience. I don't know that I've done it in a long time, but I also haven't played this a lot recently, but I like Kevin engine. Like, I think there was about 4 rounds to go, and I was like, okay, Kevin's going to end this soon. And it's not even going to be close. Yeah. Like I could see it 3 or 4 rounds ahead, and based on the cards I had and what victory points cards were available, I couldn't even find a way to buy even just one more card. And I knew he was going to end it. You could see it happening, and it was an awesome play. And it's a great game. It's one of 3 in the series, and it is interesting that you can combine 1 and 2 and 2 and 3 and 1, 2 and 3 or 1 and 3
to make one big game
or many variations of games. I have all 3. I've played them all individually. I like Century Spice the most. I don't know that I'm going to keep the other 2 at this point.
Yeah, I agree. I agree with that. I mean, I've played all 3 of them. The Century Spice Road is by far the best. Yeah. And we won't go into the Gollum edition and, how Tyler feels about that.
Yeah.
But,
We're not going to print the other 2. It's fine. Whatever. I've moved on. I'm not on that hill anymore.
I almost got you to rant about it, but.
You got other hills to die on.
Yeah.
Like the Adrenaline Hill.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
So that's Century Spice Road.
I have one more really quick that I'm going to talk about, and I've just barely cracked the surface on this because it recently showed up. It's a Kickstarter from AEG, Meeples and Monsters, and that is designed by Ol Steinus. This was a Kickstarter last year that finally shipped this year. I got it a couple days ago. Meeples and Monsters Kickstarter edition. It is a bag builder. Okay, so think Orleans, Quacks of Quedlinburg, bag building experience. I don't think the potential reaches as high as Quacks, and it definitely, I don't think, is going to compare to Orleans, but I think there is a solid and fun game here. You start out with a number of base unit workers, which are white meeples, and then you have corruption gray meeples in your bag when you start out. There are a few locations that you can go to when you start out on the board that give you various benefits, trading up workers, right? Or trading up meeples and doing other actions to get quest cards that give you additional victory points. This town is being attacked by monsters, and monster cards are assigned to various parts of the city. And throughout the game, you can fight those monsters, and then you get victory points from them, and you get benefits from them. You can build new locations from a stack until they're filled up. That have their own. Each location will have a new ability so it makes each game different. You can also increase the level of each of your units. So you start out with white units, but then there's clerics and there's knights and there's mages, and then there's some even higher specialty ones that there's an opportunity for you to get a few of those. And they all do different things and have different abilities, especially as you power them up or level them up. It's a really fun game. You draw, guys out of your bag. Those are your guys, the meeples to play for that round. You put them on those locations. You can build new locations, upgrade them. Then any of your meeples that you didn't use, you can also put them on other locations to gain benefits, or you fight monsters with them, right? And each time you defeat a monster, you replace it at the end of the round with a new monster. And all of the meeples that you played and all the ones that you generated from that round go back into, like, you've got an inn, and they go into the room part where they're sleeping or they're inactive, right? There's a solid game here. I'm excited to explore it more. There is, it's got cartoon like art, which is very fun. And I think it's a good, solid bag builder gateway game. I don't think it's going to, replace Orleans on my shelf by any means as a bag builder, but I am excited to play it more. You at the end of the game, whoever has the most victory points wins. You have a number of quests that you can complete. You're getting victory points along the way. You're culling your bag. If you take an action that's on a side of the town that has multiple monsters attacking it, the base unit white meeples flee to you because the monsters are attacking. So then you end up with more white meeples, which you don't want. They're better than gray meeples, which are the corruption meeples, and you can't do anything with those when you draw those out of the bag, right? So eventually, you're culling your bag and you're trying to make your units more powerful, and then there's some end game boss like guys that you fight and try and gain as many victory points as you can from them in the last couple of rounds. Anyway, Meeples Monsters. I backed this on Kickstarter. AEG. I'm excited to play it some more.
I remember when this was on Kickstarter and I looked at it, and my initial thought was I didn't really like the artwork, but you've got it set up over here on the table, and I took a look at it, and it's different style of artwork, but I actually think it's kind of fun now. And looking at it, it's one I want to try. I know that I had there was a YouTube reviewer friend of mine, Board Game Brody. He mentioned this game to me when it was on Kickstarter, and he had a chance to play this one, an early copy of it, and he really liked it, if I'm remembering correctly. And I just never pulled the trigger. So I'm glad you did, because I do want to try this one.
Yeah, I think it'll be fun. We play with our group some heavier games, but then we also host bigger game nights with some non-hobby gamers. And I think it'll be it'll be a good game to put on the table in front of some of them. And I'd like to try it out that way. I would play it with
Sounds
our
like
group.
a good introductory bag builder.
Yeah, and I think Quacks fills that spot a little bit.
But I don't like Quacks.
You guys, I don't think either one of you really loves Quacks.
I don't mind Quacks. It's not my favorite, but I'd happily play it.
So I am excited to play Quacks sometime soon. Someone in our group, Ben, gifted me the upgraded bits for Quacks, and I thought that was awesome and just totally unexpected, out of the blue. It's not my birthday, that's October. Send me some presents then, whatever, right? No, but like totally gifted me this out of the blue, and it was awesome. And those aren't cheap, so I'm excited. I've got them added in. I replaced all the worn out cardboard tokens that I had, and I'm ready. I'm excited to play, and I have the new Quacks expansion, so I'm excited to newer expansion. So I'm excited to get that to the table. This was about Meeples Monsters, fun bag builder. Excited to explore the potential of it a little bit more. I think it's going to be a lot of fun.
So I think that wraps up all the games that we've been playing lately.
So we're going to move on to our top 5 list of 6-player games. And 6-player games, it's an interesting dynamic, I would say. I don't know if it's a dynamic, but it's an interesting situation when you show up to game night, or you're going to have 6 people at a game night, and there's always this decision of, well, do I split it and do 2-3-player games, or play a 6-player game? It's an awkward number of players. So I think that's one of the reasons why we're talking about 6-player games.
Yeah, and there's definitely fewer good 6-player games to choose from if you want to keep that group together. So hopefully as we go through this list, it gives the listeners some ideas of, some of the games that we think are the best of that player count.
Absolutely. So Tyson, would you like to kick it off with your number 5?
Yeah, I'd love to. So my number 5 is going to be World Championship Russian Roulette. Now, this is a game that I went to Origins for the first time in 2019, and then COVID hit, and I never got to go back. And I was walking around the exhibit hall, and I came across this booth for Tuesday night games. And they had a lemonade game that I'd heard about, and I don't even remember what it is now, but I saw that there. And then they had this game, World Championship Russian Roulette. I took it and I bought it immediately, and we went and proceeded to go play with it. It's a game that can be played from 2 to 6 players, but I think the reason why it's on my list is because I think the optimal player count is a higher player count, either 5 or 6. And because this fits right up with my style of play. What this game essentially is a game in which you are bluffing and trying to win World Championship Russian Roulette. Each player has a team of Russian roulette athletes. I don't know what you would call these people.
That's weird.
Potential victims. I don't know, but there's 4 of them, including your captain. And that's basically how many lives you have. If you lose everybody on your team to a Russian roulette style bullet, then you lose. But basically the game goes through a series of phases. I believe there's 7 different phases where you're trying to pull the wool over your opponent's eyes by not getting shot. Because each round, what you're going to do is you're going to have a phase in which you're going to tuck a bullet into your revolver, which is just a deck of cards. Every player has a deck of cards that has a bunch of blank cards, so like blank bullets, and then they have a single bullet that they can put in their gun. At the start of the round, you can either put a blank card in your chamber, or you can put the bullet in your chamber. If you're caught putting a blank in your chamber, then you're going to get called out for cheating. And cheating is okay in the game within certain parameters. But the goal is everybody is trying to either outlast the other teams or get 15 points. And the way you get points is by bidding how many trigger pulls you're going to pull each round. So each round I'm going to draw a certain amount of cards from my deck. So you have chances 1 to 6 typically to be able to draw a bullet from your deck. But if you chose to not put a bullet in your deck, your odds are perfect and you're not going to you're not going to be able to shoot yourself. So you can say, I'm going to pull my trigger 5 times, and that's the most you can bid. And if I pull my trigger 5 times, I will get 5 points if I can make it through the round without either being accused of cheating or if I can just get through the round without getting shot. So everybody is trying to pretend that they either have or don't have a bullet in their gun and try and make people call them out. Because when you call somebody out, you end up having these action cards that kind of break the rules of the game. And that's where the meat is. You're trying to gather these cards and outlast everybody. Anyway, this game lasts between 30 minutes to 45 minutes, I'd say. And it's a lot of fun. There's a lot of moments in it that are really exciting because you can either call people out on cheating or you can play specific cards they thought they had you, but in fact they didn't because you got to actually point your gun in the air instead of point your gun at yourself. And there's some really exciting moments. I love this game and I would play this game anytime. It's my number 5 on my top 6-player game list.
My number 5, I feel like I'm already cheating slightly, but my number 5 is Ice Cool and Ice Cool 2. So Ice Cool or Ice Cool 2, if you play just those games, it's a 4-player game. But the way that we always play it is you get Ice Cool and Ice Cool 2 and you put them together. If you do that, then it can play up to 8 players. So the way this game works is you have a board that you create. And the way that they do it is actually pretty cool. So if you've seen those, nesting dolls where you just get one and you keep on pulling them out, that's kind of how the board is set up, where you pull out these trays and you put together the trays into a board, and there's walls that go around all these trays. And if you have both Ice Cool 2, you can make this massive board. Okay. So you have these little penguins, and these penguins are like those weeble wobble, whatever things, right? So they always stand up and you flick these penguins. And the goal of the game is that you're flicking the penguins through this large school and you're trying to go through different doors to get fish, but there's somebody that's trying to catch you. There's one catcher. Okay. If the catcher runs into you, he steals your card and he gets a point. If you're not the catcher, you're trying to go through these doors and collect fish. So as soon as somebody collects a certain amount of fish, that round's over, or as soon as the catcher catches everybody, that round's over. The cool part of the game, in my opinion, is you can flick these penguins in a way that makes them jump over walls. You can flick them in a way that makes them turn corners and go through doors, and you just pull off these moves that are awesome every once in a while, right? Yeah. Like you go through 3 doors at once, for example, get 3 fish, or you end up somewhere you just don't think you can end up. And it makes it really fun. The reason why it's on my list for 6-player games is we play it at 6 players a lot with my family, and it's just always a great experience. My 8-year-old can play it and do pretty well, as long as you can flick it straight, you can get it through those doors. She may not be able to, jump them over walls and do the fancy curves and stuff. I can barely do that stuff, right? But she can still play it and have a good time. So, it's a great 6-player game.
I've had times where I was the catcher or whatever, and it's my first shot, and I jump 2 walls, roll through the doorway, and hit somebody and get them out. Yeah. And it's like, that was awesome. Yeah. It's just, it creates some really fun moments. And I agree, like combining Ice Cool and Ice Cool to do Ice Cool 2 it's the way to go. Right. And anybody can play it. I also have added in, I got the Emerald Fish promo.
Okay. Yeah.
Where, have you played that?
No.
So there's a see-through emerald green fish that you put on a doorway, and whoever goes through that doorway first gets it. And then anytime, whether it's on that person's turn or someone else's turn, anytime someone makes contact with whoever has the emerald fish, it passes to whoever they made contact with or whoever contacted them, right? So sometimes you have the catcher will end up having it, and you don't normally want to get hit by the catcher, but it's worth victory points at the end of the round. Especially if the catcher's already hit you, then you're hunting after the catcher.
You're trying to get close to the catcher.
Yeah,
Which is completely different. Yeah.
Right. So it changes enough. Ice Cool's a great game. I was a little surprised nobody backed Iron Forest, which is the
successor, essentially, right?
Yeah, the new game that just was on Kickstarter. It had a second tier. They're taking it to the next level. With a catapult and everything. I think I'm going to buy it when it goes to retail at some point.
I missed this for some reason.
This just barely ended recently. Yeah.
Really?
Yeah, it's called Iron Forest, I believe.
That may have been one I would have backed, but yeah, when it comes to retail, I'll definitely check it out.
This is one that's my. You said you play it with your 8-year-old. I've played this with my 2-year-old, and similarly, like. He's not great at it, but he enjoys flicking and just doing it. And we don't play with all the rules. We modify it a little bit. But it's my kids, like my 2 and 4-year-olds, one of their favorite games. And it's just a blast.
Yeah. So that's my number 5, Ice Cool, combined with Ice Cool 2.
Nice. All right, my number 5 is from Yellow, and it came out in 2011. It is King of Tokyo. And I would say that King of Tokyo is one of my favorite games, but I think when you add in the costume cards, which come with the Halloween expansion, it makes the game go so much faster. And so basically, if you're not familiar with King of Tokyo, you are a monster or an alien or a giant robot, and everybody else is trying to gain control of Tokyo. When you're in Tokyo, you can damage everybody. Everybody starts out with 10 health and 0 victory points. And whoever makes it to 20 victory points first or outlasts everybody else when all the other players die off, they win the game. So and it has a Yahtzee type mechanism. You're rolling 6 dice. You get 3 rolls. You can select the dice from your first roll that you're going to hang on to, and then second, and then third. And so those rolls are attack dice. There's numbers that if you have a set of 3 or more, you get victory points for them. There's also energy dice faces that allow you to build up energy to buy specialty cards. This is one of those games where I like it more on BGA. I feel like it just plays quicker. I don't know. I think it's really well done on BGA, and I think it just on Board Game Arena, and I think it's a lot of fun, especially with the costumes, and they make the game go a little bit faster, making it a good 6-player game.
My only regret about this one on BGA is that it doesn't have the power-up expansion, and I think that elevates the play of this game by a lot. I like it a lot, and I've played dozens and dozens of games of this, and I love it, but I wish they had that power-up expansion.
Yeah, it makes each monster unique and have special abilities, which is, always a great thing in games. So I agree with you there. The power-up expansion does make it quite a bit better.
They do change it quite a bit.
Yeah.
So that's my number 5, King of Tokyo.
All right, so my number 4 on this list is one we've talked about in the past before. So I'm not going to belabor this too long, but it's Scythe. Now, the reason it's number 4 on my list is because Scythe is a game that, Kevin's already cheated a little bit in combining Ice Cool with Ice Cool 2. Scythe, as the base game, is not a 6-player game, but if you get the Invaders from Afar expansion, it becomes a 6-player game. And it's also number 4 on my list because I don't think that the best Scythe experience is had at 6 players. I think the best Scythe experience is had at 4, maybe 5 player experience.
4.5.
Yeah, 4.5 players. But at 6 players, I have to recommend this one because it completes that board, right? Like there are 6 factions on that base board, even if you just get the base game, that the game begs you to at least play this game at 6 players at least once because of the way that that board is set up. I love this game. I love that you've got the resources that are on the board and they follow with you. I love the action selection in this game, and that with most factions you can't choose the same action 2 turns in a row. I love the top row, bottom row actions of this game. I think there's so much to love about Scythe that I'll come back to this game time and time again. It's a great game at any player count, but you've got to at least try this game at 6 players at least one time. So Scythe is my number 4.
Yeah, I love it as well, and I think at 6 players, it's a great game. It's a game that keeps you engaged regardless of the player count. So even though in a 6-player game it takes a while to get back to your turn, there's still the threat of
What's going
Things
on?
happening
on the board.
Encroachment.
Yep.
Regardless of the player count, you are paying attention to how soon the game is going to end. Even though it's not your turn, like you said, you're still engaged.
Yep. I'm constantly looking at the board to see what other players are doing and what's happening, if they're going to attack me or not. There's also the neighborhood bonus type of thing. So if you enlist and your neighbor does that action, then you get that bonus. So that kind of keeps you engaged as well. Plus the board looks epic when you've got 6 players, right? And especially, I'm not a huge fan of the Wind Gambit, but those airships are awesome.
Their presence is phenomenal.
Yeah, so having those flying around on the board as well, especially at a higher player count when it's just packed, is like it's a cool experience. So I highly recommend this game at 6 for sure.
So again, that's my number 4, Scythe.
All right, so my number 4, and again, I'm cheating a little bit here, but I'm going to talk about a game.
There's a common theme here.
I know I'm cheating a lot, but I'm going to talk about a game in particular as well. But it's really any roll and write or flip and write game. It's great at any player count. Most of these you can play up to as many people as you have, sheets to draw on or whatever game it is. And 6 players is obviously in that range, so it's a great 6-player game. Any roll and write. The one I'm going to talk about is Trois Dice, and this is one that I've been playing quite a bit lately, and one that I've enjoyed playing a lot. I'm not going to really go into explaining how the game works. There's a game that thematically it's based on Trois that's been out for a while. In Trois Dice, the reason why I enjoy this game is there's so many ways to manipulate those dice. So you roll the dice, and there's a cost associated with the die that you select. But you can change the color of the dice if you would like. You can change the number of the dice if you would like. And as long as you have the resources to do that, you can really make that whatever you want. And that really can guide your strategy. And that whole part of Trois Dice is really what I like. There's a lot of different decisions to make. The first time I played this game, I was like, holy cow, this is a really involved roll and write. There's a lot going on here, and it was almost overwhelming. But once you wrap your head around that, there's a lot of strategic decisions to make, and that's one of the reasons that I really, really enjoy the game. So
I think I've said this before. I almost enjoy Trois Dice more than the original game at this point.
I definitely do, but I've only played Trois base game once, and I just remember not liking it almost at all. I really enjoy this roll and write version of it much more than that first experience, but I need to give it another shot.
So that's my number 4, Trois Dice.
So my number 4 is a 15-minute game, and this came out in 2019. Published by Breaking Games and designed by Mike Horton. It is called We're Doomed. And as the title of the game says, we are doomed because the world is coming to an end. We're building a rocket ship. It's 4 to 10 players, so it falls into that 6-player category. I think the more people you play with, the better. You're building a ship, trying to escape. semi-cooperatively. You have only a few actions available to you. You take turns really quickly. The game is 15 minutes long. At the end of the 15 minutes, however much has been contributed towards the ship determines how many spaces are available on the ship for players. And whoever has the most influence takes up those spaces. So this game, you're taking actions. At a certain point, you do a bid where you're contributing to building, contributing resources to the ship. Whoever contributes the most draws an event card. It might be a public or a private card that they read and carry out, or it might be something that they hang on to. This, you can be, one of the actions is to nuke other players, which removes them from the game. And that can happen as early as in the second or third round, which is kind of awesome.
Seems like it'd be Tyson's favorite action.
Probably. He
I've never taken the nuke action against somebody. We have somebody we play with who almost exclusively takes the nuke action.
Yes, but aside from that, it's 15 minutes. So even if you get knocked out right away, you're right back in it, and it's fun to watch what's happening. So you really, it's one of those games that benefits from playing multiple times or having a group that plays multiple times so that they understand the need for speed. And, it just creates some fun experiences. There's some cards that introduce a little bit of cheating. There's, times where your progress towards the ship that you're building is completely destroyed. Like there's some interesting dynamics when you can eliminate players. You don't want to become too influential because then you're putting a target on your head. You want to be contributing. There's different ways to play it, but it is a lot of fun. It's created a lot of fun experiences. I remember one time, just really quick, we were playing and one of the guys had a card that said like he was out of the game if he physically ate something or something like that, if he ate any food while the card was in front of him. And Shelly, my wife, was making fun of him. And, we're sitting there eating cookies or whatever, she's sitting there making fun of him and eating and,
putting food in front of him to try and tempt him to eat stuff.
Right. And then there was a card that got played that swapped seats of people at the table. And she ended up in front of that card and she didn't realize it. And she ate something. And then she stopped and like the look on her face, she was eliminated from the game. But we were on the floor laughing. It was hilarious. And just lots of fun experiences that come out of this stack of cards, these event cards that are triggered every round. And,
that's exactly what I was going to say, though, that's the quintessential memory I have of this game. And those cards have the potential to create incredible moments like that in this game. And not every game is going to have those, like, you're laughing on the ground, like, can't control yourself. But, like, the potential for it is high. And I think this game has a lot of potential for a lot of fun moments. But I don't think any game is ever going to top that game with your life.
Well, and, we're talking about 6-player games. For me, there's hesitation there to put a 6-player game that takes forever, right? And this, We're Doomed, you could play back to back to back to back 4 times in an hour. And I think that's awesome. And that'll create a number of fun experiences. And it's, it's a lighthearted game, right? It's not too serious and there's not too much strategy to it, but there is some player interaction, some backstabbing, some, it's good. That's my number 4, We're Doomed.
You mentioned that you chose, Tyler, not to necessarily put some of the heavier, more meaty games on with We're Doomed, right? Well, my goal was to put specifically games on my list that are kind of those heavier accounts or heavier play styles, but do play well at 6 players. So my number 3 is a game called Coloma. And Coloma is designed by Johnny Pat Canton and published by Final Frontier Games. This is a game that plays 1 to 6 players, and I think that it does a really good job at playing at 6 players because of what it does. So it's essentially, it's a worker placement game with variable player powers, and it has simultaneous action selection. The thing about this game that why I believe it works really well at 6 players is because the primary mechanic of the game is surrounding this action selection wheel by putting your workers there. Now, this action selection wheel has the ability to get a main action and a bonus action. And the trick here is that if you put your meeple on an action and somebody else happens to choose that same action, it makes it so you cannot take that bonus action. So it's really cool because it creates this dynamic, especially when you have more players in it, where you're trying to decide, how can I maximize what I'm doing on my turn? I may take an action that doesn't look optimal to me because I want to get more out of my turn by doing a bonus action, but then more people are thinking along that lines and trying to feint and make decisions about where they will go. So there's this moment in every action selection phase of this game where when everybody reveals what actions they're doing, it's, I can't believe you chose that action. You were supposed to choose this action. It doesn't make sense for you to take this action. And like, there's some really exciting moments there. And that's just that core mechanic. The rest of the game, I think, has a lot of really fun, cool, unique mechanics. And you're building this frontier gold mining community, and there's bonus actions and bridges you can do. There's a lot going on in this game that I think it's really good, and I think it plays really well at 6 players.
I love Coloma. I've only played a few times, I think, but each play has been a lot of fun. So I'd love to go back to this game.
Yeah, I agree. It's I remember playing at Dan's house, and it was just a great experience. It was a lot of fun to play, and the production value is great. I definitely want to get this one to the table again.
Yeah, so that's my number 3, Coloma.
All right, my number 3 is an older game. It is Power Grid. So I think this one came out in 2004. So in board game years, this is really old. But it's a lot of fun. I went through a period where we only played Power Grid on our game nights, and it was almost the Power Grid game night, and I was perfectly okay with that. It's a great 6-player game, and the reason why I think it's a good 6-player game is in Power Grid, a big part of the game is the auction. So you're auctioning off power plants. And I think generally in auction games, the more people that you have that are participating in the auction, the more interesting it is. And that's definitely true with Power Grid. It scales well to 6 players. The way that the resources work on the bottom of the board, it replenishes at a different rate based on the player count. So at a higher player count, you're going to get more resources to come back onto the board. At a lower player count, there'll be fewer. So it scales really well to 6 players. It's a tighter game at 6 players. Obviously, the more players there are, the more spots are going to be taken on the map. So it's a little bit of a tighter game, which I enjoy. It's got a million different expansions. Every expansion adds just a little bit different rule to it that completely kind of changes up the feel of the game. It's a game I love. I just think it's an awesome game. You do have to replace the paper money. Yeah, for sure. Yeah. So, we've talked about the iron clays before. They work perfect in Power Grid, right? So that's one of my only gripes about the game is the paper money you got to get rid of. But, I just think it's a fantastic game and it plays really well at 6 players.
I love the resource buying mechanic and how it gets replenished and things become more expensive. And that's really cool. The supply and demand of it I love stuff like that.
Yeah.
The first time I played this game, I remember not really liking it because I felt like the person who could do math better in their head had the higher advantage. And I think there's some truth to that. But the more I've played this game, the more I've enjoyed it. And the different maps you can get, the different everything. I think this is a fun one.
Yeah, it is a very mathy game. And I'm not ashamed to bring out my calculator and math that out that way. I know Tyler's probably rolling his eyes at me. But yeah, it is a very mathy game, but it's a lot of fun. So that's my number 3, Power Grid.
So my number 3 is, I just talked about shorter games. This one is a beast. It is Dominant Species. Came out in 2010. It was designed by Chad Jensen, who unfortunately passed away a couple of years ago, but is published by GMT Games. I've actually only played this game once, and it was at Dan's house, okay? And it was with a bunch of people who had no business playing this game. Dan and I are the only hobby gamers in the group that played this. And despite that, and despite it being like a 5-hour game, I absolutely, and the production, I mean, some of the components, it almost has, there's things in this game that remind me a little bit of Cones of Dunshire from Parks and Rec. But like, it's a brutal game. I was on the edge of my seat for those several hours. I think it turned off a couple of those people. We've never seen them again at game nights. But that one play, like, it left an impression on me. You're either mammals or reptiles, birds, amphibians or arachnids or insects or whatever, right? You have a class or an animal class that you are trying to grow and populate. And there's so many different interesting action selections and the turn order, and just, you can isolate people on the map. You can totally just destroy a person's game in this. I had a blast playing this. I would love to play it again with an actual gaming group who knows, games. And it just left an impression on me. It's a long game. I was blown away by it. That was a few years ago, I think, and I've always wanted to go back and play it. That's my number 3. Maybe a little out of place on my list, but I felt good about putting it there.
I didn't realize you'd played this one. This is one that I've always wanted to play, but felt like it required the right group. And the fact that you said that you basically chased people away from game nights on this confirms that you have to have the right group.
I think it was more of the fact that the game was 5 hours, and a couple of these people probably hadn't played anything more
than an hour or two. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, Monopoly, Risk, whatever, very low level gamers.
That'll scare most people away.
Yeah. It was, I think I messaged you that night, Kevin.
I remember when you played it. Yeah.
That might have not been the greatest choice, Dan.
Yeah, I didn't, I don't even think I'd met Dan at that point.
Oh, really?
Yeah. That was a while ago. But I do remember that text.
But it was, I had a blast, it was a lot of fun. So that was my number 3, Dominant Species.
So my number 2 is a game that the other hosts here are familiar with, and that if you've listened to episode 5, you'll be familiar with too. It's Railways of the World, which we reviewed in detail in that episode. So I'm not going to go too in depth on this because you can go back and listen to that episode if you want our full thoughts. But I want to talk just briefly about this as a 6-player game, because Railways of the World has so many different map options. There are maps on there that I think are optimal plays for 6 players. Like, you could play the Eastern and Western United States maps, and that would be fantastic. I think you could play the Great Britain map, or does that play only up to 5? That might only play up to 5.
You can play as many as you want, but it's probably not optimized
for that. But it may not be optimal, right? But I think there are some of these maps that are perfect for playing with 6 players. And in fact, I hear on BGG that there is a variant, a house rule variant that people play here where they combine the Eastern and the Western United States into one map and then play a full game on that. So like, you could have an experience that is just designed for like lots of people.
Allies all day. I don't know.
As long as you have a house big enough to fit it in, right?
Those boards are ginormous, right? Like, you'd have to have multiple tables to be able to do this. But it could be like an epic experience. And I've been playing game after game after game of this, particularly on BGA lately, and I'm loving this game. The more I play it, the more I love it, and I like it. At 6 players with those map sizes would be great.
I almost put it on my list. I left it off, but it was honorable mention.
Yeah, it's same with me. I obviously love the game. I think it's fantastic. So yeah, close to making my list as well.
So that's my number 2, Railways of the World.
All right, my number 2 is a little-known game called Seven Wonders. Obviously, very well-known. This one came out, I believe, in 2008, possibly 2007. So it's been around for a while. So this one, I've enjoyed this one for a while. So I've talked about this before, but back when I was selling games, I had an online store. I took a chance on this game. I bought a bunch of them. I'd heard some buzz about it, so I bought 2 or 3 boxes full of it, hoping that I could sell it, right? And it turns out that I could. So it actually, people that couldn't find it in other places ended up finding it in my online store, and I was able to sell them all. So the first printing has wooden discs for the money. And I have that copy of the game. And I'm never getting rid of that copy of the game because it's the only printing that has wooden money. Every other one after that has cardboard money. So I hold on to that, even though every expansion that I've gotten afterwards has the cardboard money. I still keep that wooden money. So it's kind of cool for me to have that one. The reason why I like it as a 6-player game is that no matter what the player count, the game is the same length. Everybody is playing simultaneously. And if you have it plays up to 7. If you have 7, it takes just the same amount of time as if you had 3 players, which I think is really cool. Usually when you play a game, it's like, if it's a bigger game, 30 minutes per player or something like that, or 20 minutes per player. And as you add more people, it's going to add more time. That's not how it is for this one, which I thought was pretty cool. I still think is pretty cool. It's a card drafting game. I won't go into how it plays. If you're listening to this podcast, chances are you probably played it, but if not, definitely worth checking out. And I think it's a great 6-player game.
I think that's a quality of a lot of good games at higher player counts, that it's simultaneous play, right? And Seven Wonders does a great job of that.
The other thing that I think with that simultaneous play on Seven Wonders at higher player count that it does well is that it keeps you invested on other players' actions as well, because you're doing stuff that could impact you getting gold or trading with people. So I like that about it.
Plus there's hate drafting in it, which hey, there's a little that speaks to Tyson a little bit,
Tyson's
right?
alley. Yeah. So that's my number 2, Seven Wonders.
All right. So my number 2 is a game that we've discussed, I think, multiple times in past episodes, at least 1 or 2, and that is Shadows over Camelot. In this game, you are part of the Knights of the Round Table. There's various quests that you're trying to complete and various things that you're trying to protect Camelot from, whether that's invading hordes or the Black Knight or catapults. The reason I love this game is because of the experience that it has created multiple times. It is a cooperative game where you are working together to complete quests to try and win the game. However, there is a possibility of a traitor being among the Knights of the Round Table, which creates some really fun experiences. We've had some great plays of this that we were just blown away by how fun and exciting they were. And especially, some of the accusatory words that are spoken incorrectly at the wrong players, all the while, Ben in one case was the hidden traitor, played it off perfectly, got us to give him cards that gave him, was it Lancelot's armor, or, allowed him to complete a quest that gave him an extra benefit. It was such a fun game. It's a great game to bust out. Shadows over Camelot. I think it goes up to 8 players, maybe.
With the expansion, I think.
With the expansion. Otherwise, it's 7.
It's a great moments game. We talked about moments earlier in the podcast, and this is a great game that it has those moments where I can't believe that just happened, or which is one of the fun things about it.
I think the higher player count, you kind of create more moments. There's less strategy and analysis paralysis. I left viticulture off of this because I do not want to play a 6-player game of viticulture. I think we did that one time, and it was kind of miserable.
Tedious.
I thought it was fun, but that's probably because
I enjoyed.
I eked out a win over you on the last.
Was
turn.
it a tiebreaker one? Or
it might have been a tiebreaker. I think it was like a 1-point thing.
I had fun, but there were times in that game where I was like, "Is this ever going to end?"
Absolutely. The downtime. Any higher,
That's
a lot of higher player count games, there's going to be downtime, and if you're not engaged on other people's turns, then it could be a snooze fest for sure.
Yeah, I mean, we've discussed some shorter ones and some longer ones. I like Shadows over Camelot can go a little long sometimes, depending on how much discussion there is in between players' turns. But it's a great game. I've really enjoyed playing it, and actually, that game was gifted to me by Kevin a few years ago. And that was pretty awesome. So I've enjoyed playing that one. That is my number 2, Shadows over Camelot.
All right. So my number 1 game is my number 1 game for the same reasons that Kevin was talking about 7 Wonders being his number 2 game, in that this is a game that has almost entire simultaneous play, meaning that at any player count, it is the same length, essentially. This is a game that plays 4 to 9 players, and it is a meaty game. It's Sidereal Confluence. Now, Sidereal Confluence is a game that if you're playing the first edition like what I have, it is not a looker. It is not the best looking game, but also similar to a game we talked about earlier in the podcast, Century Spice Road, it is an engine builder, and it has a lot of these resources that, similar to Century Spice Road, there's a bunch of resources that you don't care to remember the name of. They all have different names, but you just say, hey, give me a blue cube or give me a whatever. This game is a game in which what you're doing is that you are an alien race that has asymmetrical powers. Each player will get a deck of cards that is completely unique and plays completely different from any race. And as those races come in, you're playing to kind of optimize your engine. You have your own types of cards and things that are engines that can be run throughout the game. But the great thing about this game is what you're doing is that it's going through several different phases, including the first phase, which is a trading phase. And this is the simultaneous phase of the game. And it goes so quickly because what you're doing is negotiating and executing deals with other players throughout this, and just going back and forth trying to get the resources you want to be able to operate your engines. You have a bunch of different engines that you could potentially run, research new engines, and go through and operate these. And as you're doing that, one of the great things I like about it is you can make a deal about anything, and deals are binding, but you can make anything that you have, you can give to somebody. So you can actually give an engine to another person. So you can say, I'm going to give this card and hand it over to another person, and they're going to use it. Every time I've played it, it's been super exciting, and it plays the same length of time at 6 players as it does 9 players as it does 4 players. And I love that about this game. It has so much interaction. There is so much thinking going on. It's hectic. It's exciting. It's a bit of a table hog, but altogether, this game, I will play it anytime anybody wants to play it. It's one that I want to get on the table more and more.
It sounds really cool. How come you've never mentioned it before?
Yep. This suffers the adrenaline problem as well.
Maybe when you get the expansion, we'll play it.
Yeah, there's a new expansion, right?
Yeah. It just was announced.
Are you going to get
recently.
it?
No, because I can't even get the base game played. Why would I?
No,
I'm not going
I
to
would-
introduce the expansion to
I
a group
would
of
play
people.
this game.
You know, if you want me
Absolutely.
to play a game, you flash an expansion in front of me, and I love expansions. I
Oh,
don't
yeah.
know.
Even if you've never played the base game.
That's
right?
true.
There's the expansion. It must be good.
Nidavellir, bring it on. Like, I want to play.
If there's an expansion, it must be a good
It
game.
means
right?
that it
Right.
has enough of a
It
following,
has some legs.
unless it was
Yes.
just from Kickstarter.
Right, where all the expansions come out at one time.
Right.
Yeah.
Like, you know, Ankh or whatever.
Oh, that sounds good. We'll need to play that when you get back from your trip.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
My number one, Sidereal Confluence.
Okay. All right. So my number one is a game we've already mentioned. We've already talked about quite a bit, and that is Scythe. So I'll just leave it at that. Number one is Scythe.
I tried to find a reason to leave this one off my list because we've talked about it so much in the past. And again, in this episode, my number one is Scythe. I could not come up with a reason to leave it off the list. It's close to perfection. It's an amazing game. I love it. Scythe. The only thing I could think of was, well, the base game's not 6-player, but that's not enough reason to leave it off my list. Scythe is an awesome game. It's a masterpiece. I love it. Number one, Scythe.
I agree.
So that wraps up our top 5 6-player games. I, for one, love to play at 6 players, but I know they're hard to find some different games that can play at that player count well. So hopefully you found something on this list that piques your interest if you haven't already played these. That also wraps up this episode for us. Be sure to go ahead and check us out on our different locations, such as Instagram, where we post pictures of the games we've been playing that we've talked about and those that we haven't been talking about on the podcast. Also, you can look for more content from us on our Board Game Geek blog, where we talk about a bunch of different games more in depth if you like it in the written format. Also, be sure to, if you're on Board Game Geek, check us out in our Board Game Geek Guild 3947, to ask us questions, to interact with us. We love talking more about games, and if you have games that we've talked about that you like, please interact with us there. Other than that, I think that wraps up this episode. Thanks for listening.
Thanks.
Tilt Saints.
Later.
Goodbye.
Computer test. Boom. This is episode 8.
You said that with a question.
Are you sure?
It's been good times.
Cool. Awkward banter.
I don't know what the heck to talk about.
We talked a lot about anachrony in the last episode. What's your guys' take on how time travel really works? Are you guys in the camp of the Hulk and or Ant-Man from Endgame?
Are my only options Marvel-based time travel?
Right. Yeah. What,
Wait a second. Let me ask you something.
What other options do we have here?
If we can do,
Viking world lore. Oh man, what is Viking Valhalla? That's the one. So Ragnarok.
do you want to
Yes.
start over?
Sorry.
Tyson's just over there having a great old time.
Which order are we going
That's
in?
what I asked.
Yeah, I don't
You
know.
guys ignored me and started.
Well, he was singing. I couldn't ignore his singing.
so that I decided to sing
and
too.
it was beautiful.
Thank you.
All right, so we're going to...
Hold on. I gotta get my chair squeaks out.
You're also, maybe this was already said and I just wasn't listening, but you're right. I mean, not virtually, but almost, I don't know what I'm trying to say. You're right.
Kevin.
You're right, Kevin.
Thank you.
That was your...
Yeah, so thanks for finishing up my number 2 there.
Finish it up, Kevin.
Jeez.